Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, dear devotees, I will first read the entire chapter. Wonderful Krishna, all the verses. Better? Dear devotees, I will first read the whole chapter, all the verses one after another. So listen carefully to get the whole picture. And then after that I will take some verses of it. Shukadeva Goswami said, the cowherd men were astonished when they saw Krishna's activities, such as lifting Govardhan hill. Unable to understand his transcendental potency, they approached Nanda Maharaj and spoke as follows. The cowherd men said, since this boy performed such extraordinary activities, how could he warrant a birth among worldly men like us? A birth that for him would have been compatible. How could this 7-year-old boy playfully hold up the great hill Govardhan with one hand, just as a mighty elephant holding up a lotus flower, like this, little finger? As a mere infant who had hardly yet opened his eyes, he drank the breast milk of the powerful demoness Putana, and then sucked out her very life as well, just as the force of time sucks out of the use of one's body. And this is just a little bit on that. I must admit that for me personally, the idea of old age was a concept only for most of my life. It was a concept. Okay. I must admit that for most of my life, the idea of old age was just a concept. But gradually, I'm realizing it. It's happening. Now this body is 75 years old. It's exactly what's stated here, sucked out her very life as well as a force of time sucks out the use of one's body. I would wish to be able to dance like these gentlemen in the back, but I can't, even if I tried. At the age of 1, while sitting peacefully, he was taken up into the sky by the demon Trinivata. But baby Krishna grabbed the demon's neck, causing him great pain, and thus killed him. Thus his mother tied him with ropes to a mortar because she had caught him stealing butter. Then crawling on his hands, he dragged the mortar between a pair of Jarjuna trees and pulled them down with a great crash. Another time when Krishna was tending the calves in the forest, together with Balaram and the cowherd boys, the demon Bakasura came, his intention to kill Krishna. But Krishna seized this inimical demon by his mouth and tore him apart. Desiring to kill Krishna, the demon Vatsa disguised himself as a calf and entered among Krishna's calves. But Krishna killed the demon and using his body enjoyed the sport of knocking kapita fruits down from a tree. Together with Lord Balaram, Krishna killed the jackass demon and all his friends, thereby securing the safety of the Talavan forest, which abounded with ripened palm fruits. After arranging for the mighty Lord Balaram to kill the terrible demon Pralamba, Krishna saved Vraja cowherd boys and the animals from the forest fire. Krishna chastised the most poisonous serpent Kaliya, and after humbling him, he drove him forcibly from the lake of the Yamuna. In this way the Lord made the water of the river free from the snake's powerful poison. Dear Nanda, how is that? And we, all other residents of Vraja, cannot give up our constant affection for your son. And how is it that he is so spontaneously attracted to us? On the other side, this boy is only 7 years old, and on the other, we have seen that he has lifted the great hill Govardhan. Therefore, O King of Vraja, a doubt about your son arises within us. Kagamuni said, your son appears as an incarnation in every millennium. In the past, he assumed 3 different colors, white, red, and yellow, and now he has appeared in the blackish color. For many reasons, this beautiful son of yours sometimes appeared previously as a son of Vasudeva. Therefore, those who are learned sometimes call this child Vasudeva. For this son of yours, there are many forms and names according to his transcendental qualities and pastimes. They are known to me, but people in general do not understand them. To increase the transcendental bliss of the coward man of the Gokula, this child has always been auspicious for you, and his grace only will he surpass all difficulties. Oh, and by his grace only you will surpass all difficulties. This is an important point that Haridas Thakur said, no one in this world is able to chant the holy name of Krishna without distraction. No one. Such activity, namely undeviated chanting, is only possible by the mercy of Krishna. Therefore we have to beg for this mercy. Very interesting verse from Hari Bhakti Vilas. No one in this world. Distraction is also, this verse comes to my mind, Machita Sarva Durgani. If you focus your mind on me, Mat Pasadam Tarishyasi, then by my mercy you can cross over all difficulties of material life. By my grace. Machita Sarva Durgani, Mat Pasadam, by my grace, Tarishyasi, will be destroyed. So everything based on Krishna's mercy, really, that we are here also, is based on Krishna's mercy. And it comes to my mind that when I was young in Krishna consciousness, I translated this Vedavyas Prabhu and Sachidananda Swami, the Bhagavad-Gita. And in the Bhagavad-Gita there is one purport from one verse from Srimad-Bhagavatam, where it says that one who chants the holy name has taken bath in all the holy rivers of India and visited all the holy places of India. And of course, I became a little puffed up. I went to Srila Prabhupada and said, is that true? I'm translating the Bhagavad-Gita and I found this verse. Is it true that in my last life I took birth in India to take bath in all the holy rivers and visited all the places of pilgrimage? And Prabhupada smiled. He said, actually, I have created you good fortune. This is very significant. To hear this from your own spiritual master is just wonderful. But it's actually a very deep understanding is given me over the time that normally to come to the chanting of the holy name of Krishna, never mind what country, they have to take birth in all the holy rivers of India and visit all the places of pilgrimage and have taken bath. But in this age, it is a mercy. Lord Chaitanya broke open the storehouse of love of God for everybody, even somebody who comes from a military background like myself, even for us. And it is pure Krishna's mercy, pure Krishna's mercy, pure mercy of Lord Chaitanya and pure mercy of Srila Prabhupada that we can sit here. Normally, you have to go to all the holy, according to Bhagavatam, you have to go to all the holy rivers of India and take bath there and visit all the holy places of pilgrimage. That's the norm, according to Bhagavatam. But not since Lord Chaitanya appeared. Not since Lord Chaitanya appeared. It is possible for everybody. The mercy of Lord Chaitanya is there for everybody. Nityananda distributed to everyone. And Prabhupada, Ganaganatvam, as it says in our prayers, Gurvastaka prayers, is like a rain cloud. And the rain cloud showers its water everywhere over the ocean, and it has no effect. And over the rocky land, it has no effect. But on the fertile land, it has huge effect. So the thing is that one has to have something. Some Sukriti has to be there to get this to be able to catch that mercy. Because many people, they hear us standing on the street. I have one video that I show you sometimes. People are in Germany. Everybody walks by as if we don't exist. The mercy is right there, the holy name, and they don't want to take it. They look away. Some people go up to you and go like this. Unfortunate, because.
Means you're crazy.
Huh?
That means you're crazy.
Yeah. You're mad. Yes, we are mad for Krishna. That's a fact. Or at least we're trying to become mad for Krishna. So you see that the mercy is there. Bhagavad-Gita is everywhere. Prabhupada distributed Bhagavad-Gita all over the planet as it is. Millions were distributed, but who's actually taking it? You have to have some sukriti. That's there. And then you can take. Then the mercy is really there for everybody. I wanted to just add this here. It comes to my mind. Then, to increase the transcendental bliss of the coward men of Gokula, this child will always act auspiciously for you, and by his grace only you will surpass all difficulties. Unanda Maharaj, as recorded in history, when there was an irregular, incapable government, Indra having been dethroned, and when honest people were being harassed and disturbed by thieves, this child appeared in order to curb the rogues and to protect the people and enable them to flourish. Demons cannot harm the demigods, who always have Lord Vishnu on their side. Similarly, any person or group attached to the all-auspicious Krishna cannot be defeated by enemies. Therefore, Unanda Maharaj, this child of yours, is as good as Narayan in his transcendental qualities, opulence, name, fame, and influence. He is exactly like Narayan. Thus you should not be astonished of his activities. After Gargamuni spoke these words to me and returned home, I began to consider that it is Krishna who keeps us free from all trouble. He is actually the expansion of Narayan. This is a very important point to understand, that it is Krishna who keeps us free from all trouble. If we are in trouble, that means we are not endeavoring enough to serve Krishna. Interesting verse in 59, I think, in the 2nd chapter, that he says, keep all sinful activities away by the power of devotional service. That's an important point. By the power of devotional service. Why are people sinful in this world? Why we have exploitation of the environment, wars, so many things? Because of spiritual starvation. People are spiritually starved to death, practically speaking, while they're living in a society or in a culture of plenty. Everything is there, particularly in Western countries. But spiritually, practically speaking, they're dead. While breathing, even in the Bible, there's a nice story that one disciple of Jesus said, I want to go and bury my father. And he said, let the dead bury the dead. You follow me. It's interesting. Let the dead bury the dead, because people are practically speaking dead. And association with the dead is asat sangha, jaga. It won't help us. We have to associate with people who are alive in spiritual life, who are connected with Krishna, mostly with Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was so connected with Krishna, it's astounding. I mean, in his last days, one of the last thing he said, while the body was struggling, I could see that. And he said, everything moving and non-moving, there's nothing but Krishna. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. That was the last sentence. One who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me. Yuman pashyati savatra, at his last moment. And it's interesting that he says everything moves, there's nothing but Krishna, because according to Prabhupada's purport in the Srimad-Bhagavatam 4th canto, there's one verse where he says, there is only one living being. We think there are many living beings. There's only one being, namely Krishna. And the rest is just expansion of this one being. There's only one being. People pray to Krishna in the clouds. They can pray forever. Krishna is also in the clouds, but he's also in the heart. He's also in the holy name. He's also in Vrindavan. He's in so many ways. But in the ultimate analysis, there's only one being, and one eternal being, and that is Krishna, and we are just his expansions. Very important point. So, like it says here, I begin to consider Krishna who keeps us free from trouble. It's actually an expansion of Narayan. Having heard Nanda Maharaj relate the statement of Gargamuni, the residents of Vrindavan became enlivened, their perplexity was gone, and they worshipped Nanda and Lord Krishna with great respect. Indra became angry when his sacrifice was disrupted, and thus he caused rain and hail to fall on Gokula, accompanied by lightning and powerful winds, all of which brought great suffering to the cowards, animals, and women there. when Lord Krishna, who is by nature very compassionate, saw the conditions of those who had only him as their shelter, he broadly smiled and lifted Govardhan hill with one hand, just like a child picks up a mushroom to play with it. In this way, he protected the cowherd community. May he, Govinda, the Lord of the cows and the destroyer of Indra's false pride, be pleased with us. Hare Krishna. Om Agyantiminandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurmitaminan Tasmai Siguraminam. Hare Krishna. So I want to go, since this chapter is called Wonderful Krishna, I want to go to some of these pastimes. When Krishna, let me just find this here. Where are you? There. That Krishna, in his pastimes, he performed various forms. They're called Vaibhava Prakash forms. Vaibhava Prakash forms is when Krishna expands himself. And one example is, of course, is when Krishna is visiting Shrutadev and King Bahulasva in Videha. That was the first incident actually mentioned. That he, out of love for both of them, appeared in Videha, and he entered the palace of the king and the house of the Brahmana, Bahulasva, at the same time. How is that possible? Because he expanded himself in these forms, called Vaibhava Prakash. And says in the purport, in the verse, wanting to please them both, the Lord accepted both their invitations. Thus he simultaneously went into both houses, and neither one could see him entering the other's house. This is one of these pastimes that the Lord does that. Another pastime is, of course, let me just check it here. It's not what I want. It's Dwarka Lila. In Dwarka Lila, Krishna expands himself into so many, Dwarkadish expanding himself in so many forms as there were queens and palaces. And Narada Muni was surprised that in every palace he saw Krishna in performing different activities like playing chess or playing with the children, or had children riding on his back or whatever. So many different activities. That's another example of this particular pastime of Krishna. And then, of course, there is the Rasa Dance, where Krishna is expanding himself in so many Krishnas. And again, these are called Vaibhava Prakash forms, so that every gopi thought that Krishna is only dancing with her, but actually he was dancing with everybody. And then there's another example, of course, in Brahma Vyomana Lila, when Brahma comes and is wondering why Krishna asked this question. This is actually from why are there many Brahmas? And this is actually, I forgot, this is actually coming from Chaitanya Charitamrita, this particular Lila. In Brahma Vyomana, he expands himself in as many cowherd boys as there are. That's another Lila. But in the Brahma story in Chaitanya Charitamrita is that when Brahma came to Dwaraka, he knocked at the door, and the Chokidar said, "Okay, who are you?" Brahma. He reported to Krishna. Krishna says, "Which Brahma?" And then the Brahma was perturbed. He said, when he came to Krishna, "Are there many Brahmas?" And then Krishna showed himself. Only he could see that, and Krishna could see it, that there were zillions of Brahmas. And every one of these Brahmas thought that Krishna in his particular domain. It's an example of multi-dimensionality. I will explain this in a minute. They are not just 3 dimensions, there are many dimensions. Just like, for example, if you want to meet somebody in a department store at 6 o'clock, so you meet 6 o'clock, you're there, you don't see your friend. You call him on the iPhone, on the phone, he says, "Well, I'm there." "Well, I don't see you, and I don't see you either." And they will never see each other really, although from a Google point of view, they're in exactly the same coordinates. Why don't they see each other? How can they not see each other? Anybody knows? Because one is on the ground floor and another one is in the third dimension, it's in the top floor. Very simple example. You see? They can't see each other. So in the same way, there are so many dimensions. And just like Arjuna, he could not see the universal form unless Krishna gave him the eyes to see. Then he could see, which was there before as well. He couldn't see. So there are so many dimensions. And our envelope is 3 dimensions. And we cannot understand anything beyond that. Just like 2 of our sannyasis, I think Sachidananda Swami and Indradumna Maharaj went at different times to see Mount Kailash. So what do they see? They see a cold, beautiful, but very cold, inhospitable mountain. But from a higher dimensional point of view, there's a gigantic banyan tree, and Lord Shiva is sitting there, 4 Kumars are sitting there, surrounded by associates in Lord Shiva, and waterfalls and beautiful flowers and so many things. It's on a different dimension. See, we cannot see that. In the same way, if you look at Vrindavan Leela, Rupa Goswami, he said at Radhakunda under this swing, sandstone swing, and there was a tree there. And all of a sudden he heard there was some jubilant noise. He looked up and saw the huge, gigantic swing in a tree that was many, many times higher than what people see in generally. Huge in the form of a fish, and Radha was there, Krishna was there, and there were so many gopis that were in complete ecstasy swinging. So that's in a different dimension. That's why it says you cannot buy a ticket to Vrindavan. You can go here, everybody can buy a ticket. But that, what you see, is only the earthly manifestation of Vrindavan. You don't see the whole picture. There's more. And so that is all an example that the Lord is existing in unlimited dimension. In fact, if you think about it, that living being that is able to associate with unlimited living beings at the same time in a very individual way, that's God. Only God. You can associate with one person at a time, maybe a second one. Boy may stand on the street, look at one girl, or talk to one girl, think of another girl, and watch another girl that is walking over the street. You can do that. But there's only Krishna who can associate, and is associating, because he's a Paramatma, is associating with unlimited living beings at the same time, in a very individual way according to their nature and their karma. It's astonishing. Only Krishna can do that. Nobody else. There's nobody, one without a second, as it says in our scriptures. And Krishna can do that. But we are caught, I'll give you an example. Sometimes we wonder, why is it possible that a yogi can take a bath in the Yamuna and get out of the Ganga? How does it work? Well, I need volunteers. You come? 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 Yes, yes. I'll give you an example, very simple. Go down, go down, go down, go down. Lift it up. High. See, this is point A, and this is point B. A two-dimensional ant that can only understand in front, back, left, and right. It will take a long way to go from here to here, right? Long way. Another ant, which has one dimension more capability, sees B is right here. So when they're racing, this ant will struggle to get here for a long time, and this one is already. How did you do that? Well, it's next door. It's next door. So in the same way, Ganga and Yamuna are next to each other on a higher dimensional level. Very simple to understand by such a simple example. They're next to each other. In fact, the whole universe fits into the mouth of Yadra Yashoda. The whole universe fits into the mouth of Yadra Yashoda, because the distances we know of from here to Calcutta is what? 2,000 miles or something. Yes, on our level of dimensionality. On a higher dimensional level, they're right next door to each other. It's amazing. So yogi can here disappear. It's not that he's not going anywhere, he's just entering another dimension that we don't have access to. We have only access to 3 dimensions, but they are unlimited dimensions. Very important to understand that. Once you understand that principle of multidimensionality, you can understand why none of the Brahmas could see any other Brahma, because every Brahma thought Krishna is in my domain alone, in his dimension alone. They couldn't see. Another example is, of course, Lord Chaitanya dancing in front of the Rath cart. Again, Prataparudra, who stood on the palace together with the king, they could see that the Lord had expanded into seven forms. None of the people could see that, because these are different dimensions. In this case, 7 dimensions were displayed, where the one Lord is dancing with his particular group that was able to enter that particular dimension. Another example, Krishna taming 7 bulls. Again, he expands himself in 7 different forms. This is how he could do it. Nobody could tame these 7 bulls. Nobody was able to do that. But Krishna just expanded himself, and therefore he could handle them very easily. So you see this phenomena of multidimensionality. This is just a very crude concept, a material concept, basically speaking, but it's something that helps us to understand that there is so much more out there that we do not understand, that we cannot see. It's happening there. Here is Radha Krishna. What do we see? We see something, we see God, no doubt about it, but that's all we see. Sometimes the Lord is allowing somebody to enter into a higher dimensionality. There was a very painful example of it, that in Rajapur, Janani told me, Pankaj, one of the two, I don't know who, he told me that there was a Muslim boy. He went into this temple of Rajapur and tried to pull out a nose ring out of the nose of Subhadra. All of a sudden, the hand of Balaram expanded and smacked him into the face. He found himself outside the temple. He found himself outside, and he was crying. His mother saw all 5 fingers were on his face. It's an idea. One should try this, but don't do that, because naturally, who wouldn't mind to be beaten by Lord Balaram? But you see, what we see is just on our dimensionality. All of a sudden, this hand can come out and smack this boy. You know, very fortunate child to be beaten by Lord Balaram. So we have to understand these pastimes in a deep way. We have to enter. Why is that? What actually happens there? What actually happens there? We take it, and Krishna did this and that, but what actually happens there? How do we understand this? And how we make it understandable to others? What happened there actually at this situation? And there are other instances. Let me just look it up here. The dancing in 6, 7 different groups we have already explained. And so then the verses Purve Yatshe Rasadi Lila Kaila Vrindavani Alaukika Lila Gauda Kaila Kshani Kshani. And that is just as Lord Krishna performed the Rasa Lila dance and other pastimes in Vrindavan, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed uncommon pastimes moment after moment. And so this is just relating to this comparison to the Rasa Lila. There, the Lord expanded himself in so many. And here also, when we see this, once we understand this concept, that the same was happening there. These are Prakash forms, by Baba Prakash forms of the Lord, that he expands at different times, or how do you say, manifests at different times to different people. And you can understand in this way how there's a whole technology behind it that we are not able to access. A human being is completely confined within his 3-dimensional envelope. That's it. And therefore you can see only so much. But then other people, like Prabhupada, he would stand in front of the deity in one place, I don't know the temple, and he called the pujaris immediately to his room after that and said, the deity is complaining that the offerings are irregular. You see? Prabhupada, he had access to that. When Prabhupada was having kirtan, I think it was in Conway Hall in London, all of a sudden Prabhupada was glorifying in the middle of Kirtan Narada Muni. This was Narada Muni who carries a veena. And the devotees couldn't understand it, why Prabhupada interrupted the Kirtan. And then Prabhupada told them, Narada came. Narada, and I want you to establish a little asana on the altar with Narada. If you ever go to London, into Soho Street Temple, you see there's a little Shingasan for Narada. So Krishna, he is transcendental to place and to time also. There's a famous story that I heard a long time ago. One time Krishna went with one of his friends, and it was very hot. So Krishna said, I would like to take a little rest. Could you get me some water? He said, yes, of course. So this boy started going, and there was a village not far away. And he knocked at the door. A very extremely beautiful girl came out, extremely beautiful. He looked at this girl, he looked her deep into the eyes. She looked into his eyes, and they fell instantly in love with each other. And so he heard himself saying, would you marry me? And he said, yes. And they're married, and they had children. Time passed, he inherited the farm of the father. Father died, mother died. He was there with children and a wife. 12 years passed. Finally, a great flood came and wiped so many villages away. And his village also was completely swept away, and he saw the only way to survive is the other side of the river, of the flood. And he swam there with all the children, 3 children and a wife on his back. He lost one child after the other. Then he lost his wife. And then the waves threw him on the land. And he was crying and crying. He said, oh, Krishna. Then he heard Krishna's voice. And he said, Prabhu, where's my water? Where's my water? Because the 12 years were just for Krishna seconds. Just seconds for Krishna. He lived a whole life in this dimension. You see? For Krishna the gopis were dancing the night of Brahma. But from our level, it was just one night. So Krishna can stretch time, can stretch circumstances, can stretch places. He's capable to everything. There's nothing Krishna cannot do. That's why he's God. And people have some very crude understanding of God. Like if you look at our Abrahamic religion. Abrahamic religion is all based on Abraham. According to Muslim, Quran, as much as Torah, Jewish Torah, as much as Christian teaching. And their concept of God is very limited. Very limited. He's living in a heaven, in the material heaven actually, because they don't have access to the transcendental world. And so their understanding is very little of God. Here in our scriptures there's so many explanations. I remember when Prabhupada was in Germany, he spoke to one Christian scholar, big scholar, Jesuit scholar. And so Prabhupada asked always the same question. What is your philosophy? Thank you very much for coming. Welcome. What was your philosophy? And the man explained the typical Christian philosophy. I don't want to get into it. I know it well. I learned it from childhood. And then after some time he asked Prabhupada, Swami, what do you think? And Prabhupada was silent. For quite some time he was silent. So finally he spoke, and his words were ecstatic. It was just like the universe speaking. It was so strong. His voice was strong. He said, 2,000 years have passed. And he made a break. 2,000 years have passed and still you do not understand Jesus. The man said, why is that, Swami? He said, because if you understand Jesus, you can understand Krishna. And if you understand Krishna, you understand Jesus. And if you want to love Jesus, you have to love Krishna because he's the Father. Jesus said you should love your Lord with all your heart. He didn't talk about himself. And if you love Krishna, automatically you love Jesus. And if you tell me that you want to love only Jesus but not Krishna, that means you have no knowledge. That's so clear. That means you have no knowledge. And that's the situation. That's why we have these different Abrahamic religions fighting with each other since time immemorial, because they don't see the soul in each other. Prabhupada wrote something 1940 in Back to God, that unless the soul is seen in all creature, the dual frenzy, the difference between love and hate will go on forever, and the world will never be able to see peace. That's the bottom line. Unless the soul is seen in all creatures. Now, one difficulty is of Abrahamic religions, they do not have a concept of soul. There's no concept of soul. What is the beginning of your life? In Abrahamic religion, the day of your birth. It's the first, it didn't exist before. You begin existing when you are conceived by your parents. That's the beginning of life. There's only one life. Then the problem is, once you establish that philosophy, how do you explain that young children are suffering? How do you explain that? I asked this question when I was 10 years old. No kidding, 10 years old, I asked my priest when my brother had died a very painful death. Right there, he was lying there, the body was lying there. I asked the priest, Father, where is God in all this? How is it possible that my brother suffers like this? What has he done? He said, I don't know. I said, it says in the Bible, as you sow, you reap. What has he sown? He was just a child. He said, I don't know. And I lost my faith in Christianity at that time, because there is no answer for such a simple question that every rickshawala in India can explain to you. Everybody. That I suffer in this life because of my last life. Even Kamsa was explaining when he was on the chariot. He was talking about that. That one life after another, the soul is going from one body to another. So there is no deep understanding of soul. This is the first thing, Aham Brahmasmi, one of the first things that we learn in Vedanta Sutra, the A. Where's the question of B, C, D, E if you do not know A? Where's the question that you understand anything if you don't get the first point right? If 1 and 2 is 3, 1 and 2 is 4, according to your calculation, then whatever you rightfully add on, millions of figures, everything figure is right, because the first step is wrong. Your calculation will be wrong. That's the point. So the very basic understanding is that we are spirit soul. And so Prabhupada, when he came to Germany, there was this very famous professor, and Durkheim. He's a Zen Buddhist. He brought Zen Buddhism to Europe, actually. And Prabhupada explained, he heard his philosophy. He asked this question, Mr. Durkheim, what is your philosophy? And he explained Zen Buddhism. And I was a Buddhist before. Understood, he spoke really well. Then Prabhupada said, the man was polite enough, he asked Swami Prabhupada, what do you think of this? And Prabhupada said, it is meaningless. It is meaning, it has no meaning. So he said, why? Prabhupada explained to him, you see, that what is traveling in your philosophy from life to life? This is a good question. The Christians don't have an answer, the Buddhists not either. Because the Buddhists believe in reincarnation, but what travels there is the soul, the mind. The mind is traveling, which is true. But the mind is only traveling because the soul is traveling. They don't understand that principle. That the soul is traveling from one body to another. Whether you talk about Buddhism, whether you talk about Christianity, Muslim religion, Jewish religion, there is no defined concept of soul. And once there's no clear defined concept of soul, you cannot understand anything. You can't. You can't. Your whole basis is not there. Your whole life will be based on a false foundation. You work like a dog, but your whole life is based on the false foundation that you are the body. And therefore, even if you're as rich as Mr. Ambani, at the time of death you become a pauper. You lose everything you worked so hard for. Everything. That is a fact, because your whole life is based on a false foundation. We have to base our life on the foundation of Krishna consciousness, of Krishna. We are parts of Krishna, like Prabhupada explained to Durkheim. He said, you're not the body. He understood that. You're a spirit soul. He didn't understand that. You're part of God, He didn't understand that at all. And then the conclusion, and your duty is to serve God, because we are eternal servants of God. Buddhists cannot understand this. Christians can't understand it. Nobody can understand it unless you come to the Vedic philosophy, where there's a very clear understanding who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. Very clear understanding. So if people don't have that understanding, they suffer, basically speaking, an identity crisis. Young people in India, I brought this example many times. Right now, young people, who am I? They try to give themselves an identity. So all of Indian youth is shaving his heads on the side, and has this tuft of hair on the top, and they look like pineapples. Right? Why is that? Because of identity crisis. They have the world lives actually in a permanent identity crisis. People dress this way, that way. Fashions is nothing but an expression of identity crisis. Our identity is that we are eternal souls. If you miss that, then you give yourself some material identity that has no meaning. There's no meaning to it. It's superficial. So in Krishna consciousness, we understand these things very carefully. How Krishna can associate with so many gopis at the same time, and no gopi can see that Krishna is with every other gopi. We learn to understand that. How is it that Krishna can appear to so many Brahmas, and every Brahma thinks he's in his own domain, if we have no knowledge, if we're not trained properly? How are we going to understand this? Therefore, we have to read Srimad-Bhagavatam. We have to understand that Prabhupada is present in Srimad-Bhagavatam. I give you an example. Our God brother, Chandramauli Maharaj, he's reading regularly Srila Prabhupada's books, every day, 2-3 hours. One time, he said, he was reading Krishna book, and all of a sudden the whole atmosphere changed. He was reading loud. So he stopped reading, and then Prabhupada's voice came in, and Prabhupada kept reading where he had stopped reading Srimad Bhagavatam. He said it was totally unreal. Totally unreal. It was like listening to a tape recorder, but it was actually Prabhupada's voice came in, because Prabhupada is not dead. He reasonably thinks that Vaishnava dies while he's living still in sound. So Srimad Bhagavatam, the purpose, Srila Prabhupada is right there. We are associating with Srila Prabhupada by reading. We are associating with the holy name, and we chant Hare Krishna. It is a transcendental association, and I have to come to the end of my lecture. I thank you very much. I wish you all the best for your life. God is blessing you. He will bless you forever if you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Rama. And once more, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Rama. And once more, loud, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. And one more, even louder, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.